Welcome into the Big Hit, folks. Another episode of the Big Hit. It is the finale of Scrap for Your City. We got Elliot Hicks representing New York and Jake Taylor representing Pittsburgh. I'm your host, Chris Hayes, on this episode, and we're going to get right to it here. I'll give you a brief layout of the rules. I'm going to ask 6 questions I got here. The last question will be word for more points, considering it might be close, it might be a tie or something like that. So we got 6 questions. I'll start with Jake for the first 3, then Elliot for the last 3, and they'll each give their takes for the respective questions, and then I'll decide the winner as we go. So we'll get right to it here. Who is the best team in the city's history is the first question, and we'll start with Jake for Pittsburgh.
The 2015 Pittsburgh Pirates. Just kidding. The 1979 Pittsburgh Steelers, another steel curtain, the heyday, the 4-time Super Bowl champions. The team with 12 Hall of Famers on it, including coaches and our Rooney there, but 12 Hall of Famers on one team, 4 Super Bowls. I mean, you can't match that. It's the best team in NFL history, the best dynasty in NFL history. They won 6 AFC Central titles. They 5 in a row, actually, 4 Super Bowls there within a few years. The team was stacked. You have some of the game's best players on that team: Terry Bradshaw, Franco Harris, Lynn Swann. On defense, you have the best Mean Joe Green. You have Jack Lambert, Jack Ham, Mel Blount. You have every single name you could possibly think of that was good at football played for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, so the Steelers drafted well a couple of years, and they took a whole decade to win 4 Super Bowls. The New York Islanders back in the 80s won 4 Stanley Cups in a row, if we're going to talk about weave in a little bit of history. And you really can't talk about best teams in New York City history without talking about the Yankees. When you win 27 World Series, you're going to have some amazing teams. The mid-1920s, they called the team Murderers Row. There are just so many great players. You've had the Giants knock off the suddenly unstoppable New England Patriots on 2 different occasions. The Jets winning Super Bowl III. There have been so many great teams, but I think I'd have to go with those mid-20s New York Yankees. They were just the most dominant force in all of baseball maybe that has ever been seen.
I think you guys both made fair points. I think Elliot had a really good point with the Islanders winning 4 straight cups. So people forget that happened, but it was a really tremendous accomplishment. But at the same time, like Jake said, that Steelers team with the draft picks being in the Hall of Fame is impressive too. It could go either way here, but I'm going to go with Elliot's answer. I think the Islanders thing combined with the Yankees winning all those championships, even though people like to say there were a lot fewer teams then, the Yankees had a lot more firepower, but give them credit though, they still won the most championships of any baseball team by far. I'll give Elliot the edge here. He's up 1-0 on Jake. Let's move into question 2. Who is the best coach of all time in your city? Jake?
You have to think when you think best coaches in sports, this man comes up in the top 5. I think Chuck Noll. I think he's the best football coach of all time. Definitely. I mean, Bill Belichick won more, except he cheated. He did cheat. It was proven that he did cheat. So I think that Chuck Noll, the fact that he didn't cheat, he won 4, which is impressive in itself. And he had so much talent on that team that could be your rebuttal. Like Chuck Noll, he had, like I said, all those Hall of Famers on this team. But I really think it's impressive that he got all that talent to perform to the level that they can perform. Because you see all these teams, these professional sports teams have so much talent, and you always ask, why do they lose? Why don't they get far? Why don't they ever win the championship? It's because coaching. They don't have the right coach. I really think Chuck Noll ran that team. The players were afraid of him, and I think Chuck Noll really was the best football coach of all time. He had 4 Super Bowls. He had 9 AFC Central champions. 6 in a row. He won 6 in a row, so he was just dominant. No one was better than that. I think best football coach of all time, best football team of all time, and 4 Super Bowls. You can't really beat that.
Yeah, I mean, Chuck Noll was definitely great for those Steelers, but I mean, Al Arbor, who led the Islanders to those 4 Stanley Cups in a row, he's one of the best hockey coaches of all time. He's generally regarded as. Noll being one of the better football coaches of all time. So was Bill Parcells. He coached both of the New York teams, both the Giants and the Jets at times. And of course, with the New York Yankees, when you win 27 World Series, you got to have some great coaches and managers behind you. You had Casey Stengel back in the days of Murderers Row and back in the early era of baseball, who was such a dominant manager. And then Joe Torre in the latter years, winning all those World Series with the Yankees in the mid-90s and early 2000s. So there's just, again, with so many great teams in New York, you're going to have great coaches, great managers behind them. And some of those guys are definitely the greatest of all time in their sports and for the city.
Yeah, I think if we're just listing off great coaches in our city's history, I think Mike Sullivan, they're already the winningest U.S.-born hockey coach in his 2.5 season. He already won 2 Stanley Cups. He brought a team that was bad. They were nearing the bottom of the NHL, and he won 2 Stanley Cups in a row and favored to win this 3rd Stanley Cup in a row. And it's not just because the team was good, because they had Crosby and Malkin and all that stuff. They didn't win for 7 years until Mike Sullivan came into town, and then he coached his team there. The Pittsburgh Steelers have only seen 3 coaches. That's just how good these coaches have been for the city, for the winningest football team of all time. And they've only had 3 coaches: Bill Cowher, great coach, and Mike Tomlin, the youngest coach to ever win the Super Bowl. And the fact that he's never had a losing season, I think he has the record for most wins in a 10-year span. So that's just remarkable in itself. So I really think that Pittsburgh has the best coaches, but Chuck Noll, best coach of all time.
I mean, all those other guys for Pittsburgh, they were pretty good, but I mean, it is pretty funny how you will argue for Mike Tomlin when it benefits you, but against him in any other case. Tomlin, you know, as it's come right out of your mouth on this very show, there's been a lot of shortfalls that he's had. Bill Cowher only won 1 Super Bowl, and I feel like he had a lot more disappointments than successes. And a guy like Sullivan has only had recent success. He failed as a head coach of Boston and floated around as an assistant for a guy like John Tortorella. And when he went with the Blackhawks, he was like a scouting director or something. He wasn't even a coach for that team. So, I mean, if Sullivan keeps it up and keeps doing well the next couple of years, you can really throw him in the conversation. But I feel like it's too early for Sullivan, and the other guys, they haven't quite had the dominating success, kind of like some of the guys from New York have.
Yeah, like Ben McAdoo. Yeah, Ben
no,
McAdoo.
I didn't say everybody. There have been some pretty bad coaches in any city's history, but you know, I feel like New York's got the better.
Okay. Definitely some fair points from Elliot there, especially regarding Jake's slander of Mike Tomlin. That has been well documented.
13 wins this season.
However, yes, Tomlin is a great coach, and I got to give the point to Jake here because Chuck Noll, I think he had a great point. Maybe the best NFL coach ever. You got to consider guys like Bill Belichick for sure, even though Spygate and Deflategate and all that stuff, he's a tremendous coach. But Chuck Noll may be the best NFL coach ever, leading those 70s Steelers teams to 4 championships. And before Chuck Noll, they were nothing. They were a laughing stock, really. People forget that. So Chuck Noll leading the Steelers to 4 titles, he gets my vote here, and Jake gets my vote here too. So it's tied 1-1. We're going to move on to question 3. We'll start with Jake again. Jake, what makes Pittsburgh's history better than New York's history?
I think overall what really makes Pittsburgh's history the best is that we done so much with so little, and that when you think about Pittsburgh, if you're not from Pittsburgh, you know that they're the city of champions. That's our nickname. Our name is the city of champions because we, other than the Boston, the only team with every single sports team to have at least 5 championships. That's remarkable. I mean, think about it. Some people go their whole life without seeing it. There's just a Eagles fan who's 99 years old, just saw his first Super Bowl. I've already seen 2. I mean, this history is just so much better than New York. I mean, New York sure was good 80 years ago at baseball. I mean, the Giants, they were wretched when they won that Super Bowl against the Patriots. I mean, they weren't even good. I mean, heck, it was a great story, but when you think of quarterbacks, you think Eli Manning just got lucky. I don't think the Giants have a rich history at all. I think that the Pittsburgh sports in general, the Penguins, the winningest, the quickest to win 5 championships within 25 years. Here recently, the Pirates won how many back? 5 real early on, and then the Steelers are the winningest football team ever. So I really think that I think the Pittsburgh's history is the best. They're synonymous with champions, with the city of champions, and New York's got. They've done too little with too much. We've done a lot with a little.
Yeah, I mean, with New York, they definitely were good at baseball 80 years ago, as you said. And I mean, this is a question about history, first of all, so thanks for the little extra push there. But also with New York, the Yankees have won championships as recently as 2009, and they came close to the World Series last year. The Mets were in the World Series in 2015. Those giant Super Bowls were within the last decade or so. But again, for New York, I mean, I kind of have to piggyback off the last couple questions here with all the great teams, all the great players, all the great coaches. Yankees 27 World Series. I mean, and really every one of these teams in New York has had some sort of success, even if you throw in the New Jersey Devils with their couple of Stanley Cups. The Rangers had guys like Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier pretty near their prime on their team. Of course, the Islanders with the 4 Stanley Cups. There's just a long and storied history of success in New York. And I mean, even though there are a few more teams to go off of in New York than Pittsburgh, it's only because they're more marketable market for the media and for the fans and that kind of stuff. So I don't know that you can really hold that against New York and kind of take that away from their success a lot of the teams have had.
Yeah, I think, well, New York's being such a big market, They're a huge market, so I think that's the Yankees are the third richest sports franchise in the entire world in history. So right there, that's the only 27 is remarkable, but that's it. I mean, if the Pirates weren't the lowest marketed team, I mean, it's a small city, it's a small team. They don't have as much money as the Yankees, so they don't buy 27 championships. They have to earn the 5 of them. But still, 27. We forget that we don't even have a basketball team. New York has 2 basketball teams, and we haven't even mentioned them once because that's how bad the history of them they were. I mean, they were terrible. They still are terrible. It's like we forget about them. We didn't even mention them in the history and the fact that they have more sports, twice as many sports teams, way less rich history. They're not the city of champions. The Yankees fans are hated. Go Pittsburgh.
I mean, I haven't seen any team in New York undergo a 20-year losing streak at any point in time, so we'll just go with that. And why do people normally hate the Yankees? Because they're so good. They have history. So I don't really know what else I can say to that.
Yeah, this one, like you guys talked about, it's tough because of the market size, like you guys said. Jake mentioned the fact that New York can buy championships. That's definitely a fair point in a lot of cases, especially baseball with no salary cap. Before this question was asked, in my mind, I predetermined that New York had a good shot at winning this one. However, Jake made a good argument, I think. I think it was a better argument than Elliot's in this case. And he convinced me, so I'm going to give the point to Jake. I think considering Pittsburgh only has 3 sports, New York has how many? New York has, they have multiple teams for different sports. Pittsburgh only has 1 in 3 different sports. And I think Pittsburgh's history is right up there with any city in the country, really. With the Pirates winning 5 titles, Steelers winning the most Super Bowls ever, and the Penguins winning 5 Stanley Cups. With the 3 teams, that's pretty impressive. I'm going to give Jake the point. So Jake's up 2-1 right now. We're going to switch it over and start with Elliot for this question now. Elliot, why is the culture of New York sports better than Pittsburgh?
I feel like the culture is definitely a gigantic advantage when it comes to New York City. As we went over a little bit in the last question, it's the highest, it's the best media market in all of sports. Here are just some of the major leagues that have their headquarters right in New York City. The NFL, the MLB, the NBA, the NHL, Major League Soccer, and the WNBA all have their headquarters in New York City because it's just where people want to be. It's where the money is, it's where the fans are, and they're fans of any walk of life when you go to New York City. It's just the peak of American culture, and by extension, it's arguably the peak of sports culture. They've got a lot of the more historic and innovative stadiums. When you go back to the old Yankee Stadium, Shea Stadium, a lot of the old other stadiums in the city. And again, they've had some of the better players and some of the better fans. And you can even find a Yankees hat when you walk around anywhere in the whole world. And you really can't do that with any team in Pittsburgh, save for maybe a couple of people in South Korea when they had Jung Ho-gung a few years ago. So I feel like, New York, it's just the cream of the crop.
I think New York sports culture is dead because they have not been good in a century. I mean, they really, if you think about it, all of their championships came so early on in sports, so early on in everything. I mean, the fact that the Yankees have 2 in our lifetime, only 2. The Giants have 2. Jets are the laughing stock of the NFL. The Rangers. They just traded their captain away just for nothing, for a bag of pucks and a can of chew. They're just terrible. I mean, think about it. The Islanders, sure, they won 4. The culture, they're winners 4. When there were 17 teams in the NHL, the Rangers, they won 4 too. When there 3 of them, there were 6 teams in the NHL for 39 years, and they could only win 3 championships with 6 teams. The New York, they're just a laughingstock. Other than the Yankees, other than the huge players the Yankees have, that's all New York has. Pittsburgh, the culture in Pittsburgh the sports are everything in Pittsburgh. I mean, as soon as you land, if you're coming in from out of town, as soon as you land in Pittsburgh in the airport, you have the immaculate reception. You have a statue of Franco Harris catching that ball. Every single Permani's, a nationwide famous restaurant, just murals of athletes and everyone from Pittsburgh. It's just so rich. Some of the sports best players played in Pittsburgh. You can't say that. I mean, Sidney Crosby right now, for instance. You have the league's most electrifying football team, Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown, Juju Smith. These players, the culture is just, players want to come to Pittsburgh because they know how crazy the fans are, the terrible towel, the culture. They started with towel waving. You see all these teams passing out towels before the game just as a little charity giveaway here. Here's a towel, wave it so we look cool. Who started that? The Pittsburgh Steelers, Myron Cope, dude. The GOAT. Okay, listen, the culture is everything. Pittsburgh is sports. We're the city of champions, 5-5-6, the 4-1-2. Let's go.
All right. Wow. Good stuff, guys. Again, I think this question is kind of swayed to begin with, I guess, because New York, again, much bigger market, a lot more people in New York. I'm sure a lot more sports fans in quantity. But I think Jake's argument, again, was solid. I think both arguments were good. I think Jake's was really solid. He was very passionate. I liked that. And I like, too, that I think Pittsburgh, as a smaller city, gives them an advantage in a lot of ways because it's more of an intimate sports environment. I think in New York, you can do a lot of different things. You can go to Broadway shows. You can go to different historical sites and stuff like that. I think in Pittsburgh, it really is a lot about sports. So I'm going to give the edge again to Jake here. And similar to the Golden State Warriors, similar to the Cleveland Indians, Jake is up 3-1 right now. So we'll see if he blows it. We have 2 more questions left. Again, Jake's up 3-1 right now. I'm going to start with Elliot. Elliot, how bright is the future of the sports teams in New York?
You know, I really have talked a lot about the past in these questions. And of course, you know, we've already been over how great New York's history is, even if some people on this set would not quite see it the same way I do. The past is bright, but the future's brighter. The New York Yankees, they had all that success in the past. They're set up for another 10, 15, 20 years of just pure domination. They spent the money. They took on, I believe, the biggest contract in MLB history in Giancarlo Stanton. They drafted well with guys like Aaron Judge, good trades with acquiring guys like Gleyber Torres and Billy McKinney, and then getting Aroldis Chapman back the next year. The New York Yankees have so much young talent. The Mets on the other side of the city, you know, they finally are going to have all that young pitching come together, and guys like Jacob deGrom, Noah Syndergaard, Matt Harvey, and they could be great for years to come. And the Devils are just seeming to come out of a rebuild now. They're finally having a little bit of success, so that should really grow in the next couple years. And even though there are a lot of teams, the Giants and the Jets are not in the best spot right now, neither the New York Rangers or the Islanders, but there's been no better time to rebuild in all of sports than there is now. You look at MLB as a whole, there's probably at least a third of teams that would consider themselves in a rebuild right now. There's really no better time in all of sports to be rebuilding. You still have enough fan interest there. There's so many more talented athletes than you had years and years ago. And there's really no better time in sports to rebuild. And all of these teams, along with many of these other teams in New York City, they're either going to be succeeding in the next 1, 2, or 3 years, or they'll be back on top within the next 4, 5, or 6 years. So it's still a very bright future, whether you're looking near future or further away.
I think New York's future is as bright as the Yankees' pocket is deep, because that's the only team that stands a chance to do anything. Because they're just unbelievably stacked right now, but that's what happens in a sport with no salary cap, and you have all the money in the world. You can just buy championships, and that's what's going to happen there, New York. But the fact that New York's future with basketball is as bright as Pittsburgh's, and we don't have a team, that's pretty bad. The Pittsburgh Penguins, coming off 2 Stanley Cups, are the favorite to win this year, and if they don't win this year, heck, I might as well have that so the players get some rest and come back and win the year after, because you know Sidney Crosby's in his prime, Evgeny Malkin's about to win the MVP of the whole league. Who would have saw that coming? Matt Murray won 2 Stanley Cups before his rookie year was even over, so his future is crazy. Right now we have Jake Gensel, Connor Sheary, Brian Rust. The future of the Penguins is still every single player is in their prime right now. So then we'll just switch over to football real quick. If you have $10 in your pocket, don't know what to do with it, bet it on the Pittsburgh Steelers to win the Super Bowl next year, because I guarantee you it's going to happen. Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, if he plays when they franchise tag him, which he will. He'll stay in Pittsburgh, because why not? 4-1-2, it's the GOAT. So he's going to stay there. They're building up this defense. They leave. They believe they're about to win. I guarantee that, you know, the Pittsburgh Steelers are a threat. They're a threat to win Super Bowl every single year. They're definitely a threat these next 2 years here with Ben Roethlisberger still. I mean, the future is the future. I'm worried about next year and the year after that, and the fact that we can maybe win 2 championships with the Steelers and the Pens, and then the future's so bright for the Pirates. I mean, come on. They're trading away McCutchen. They're trading away all these players to get these draft picks and get these young players coming up, changing the culture here in Pittsburgh. They want to win. You know, Bob Nutting's out here to get these wins, to get back on track, to maybe win a World Series, bring it home, so we can still call ourselves the city of champions. I think the Penguins' future is brighter than any other team in the NHL. I think the Steelers' future is brighter than any team in the NFL. And the Pirates, I think their future's bright, not as soon as as the Pens and the Steelers, but I think they can win here within the next 10 years. As for the basketball team, got a better chance than Brooklyn Nets and New York Knicks.
Yeah, I really haven't talked about basketball all that much. And the Nets, I feel like the Nets, it's going to be a while for them. But for the Knicks, they're finally under new management. They made a bad decision, hired Phil Jackson. That was not a good choice. They got him out of the way. They still have a great talent, Kristaps Porzingis, who they can start to build around with this new management and all that kind of thing. So really, you can watch out for the Knicks. And a couple of things kind of going against the Steelers and the Pirates there, For the Pirates, I really don't see the same winning culture that you see in teams like the Pittsburgh Penguins. I'll give you that. And for the Steelers, again, very convenient for you to argue for Ben Roethlisberger when it's convenient and positive for you. There's a great chance Ryan Shazier never plays football again. It's going to be a stretch to even get him there. And for Le'Veon Bell, he cares more about the money in Pittsburgh. I'll be surprised if he plays this year, let alone next year. So.
All right. I think this one is pretty clear for me. I think the only team in Pittsburgh that has a legitimate shot of winning a title this year, next year, is the Penguins. I'm a Pittsburgh guy, as people might know. The Steelers have choked for several years now. I anticipate that to continue. They've shown no indication that they can do anything in the playoffs the past few years. As much as I want to see it, I don't think it's going to happen. The Penguins have, so let's give them some credit for that. The Pirates, I don't see them contending for a World Series anytime soon, really. I'm going to give this point to Elliot. I think the Yankees with Judge and Stanton and the pitching rotation, they could win the World Series this year and maybe a few more times in the years to come. I think the Knicks and the Nets, like you said, they're not good right now. But the Knicks, especially with Porzingis, and I'm sure they'll have a high draft pick again this year, they can make some noise in the years to come. And I think, importantly, with the Giants and the Jets, they might be drafting a guy like Josh Rosen, a guy like Sam Darnold this upcoming draft, which could turn their whole franchise around very quickly. So I'm going to give New York the edge here and Elliot the edge. So and to the final question, 3-2, Jake is leading. So it's winner take all here in the last question. For the championship of Scrap for Your City, part 2 after our first edition 2 years ago, for the title, we'll start with Elliot here. Give an overall argument of why New York is better than Pittsburgh.
I really feel like I've provided enough evidence here for have New York run away with this. New York, in American history in general, that's where he came for the American dream. You look toward the Statue of Liberty, and it's just the best feeling in the world if you're showing up to America. And when you look at the sports culture in New York, and when you look at the sports teams there, I feel like a lot of sports fans get the same feeling when you look toward Yankee Stadium or when you look toward MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey. There's just so much good that's been going on for New York, both in the past, hundreds of years ago with how good the Yankees were, and even within the last 100 years or so as well, Yankees have been great. Mets have had their good times. You had the Jets pull off the miracle, still one of the most talked about upsets all time in Super Bowl III. You've had the Giants pull off a lot of recent upsets. New York has been the underdog a lot of times, and I feel like a lot of this for this Scrap for Your City, I've been a bit of an underdog here. But I feel like all these arguments that I made in favor of New York, I feel like it's got to be good enough to at least have a shot to win this thing.
Pittsburgh is synonymous with winning. We are the winningest city in sports history, hands down. We have 3 teams. To put this in perspective, because we're against New York here, New York has 8 sports teams, 8. Pittsburgh has 3. Out of their 2 football teams, they have combined 5 Super Bowls. The Steelers have 6. They have more with less teams. That's just history there. Football gone. Scratch that off. For hockey, they have 5. Between the 2 teams, I only count 5 because the Rangers won 3 in the 40 years that there were only 6 teams, so it doesn't even count. And when the Islanders won their 4 Stanley Cups in a row, there were only 17 teams in the NHL. That's terrible. The Penguins just won 2 in a row just now with 31 teams in the NHL. I think if you had Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, this whole team, and you put them against 16 other teams, they're going to dominate. They're going to win every single game. There's no competition there. So talking about history, I think that the history doesn't even count there with the leagues not being so legitimate here in New York. I mean, sure, you can count them short 4 in a row were impressive, but once Wayne Gretzky got in the league, he just wiped the floor clean. New York never saw a chance, and even when he had the Rangers had him. I mean, sure, you can take the best player in the world and give yourself a chance. But the Yankees, on the other hand, you can buy championships, sure. It's just like Real Madrid. Barcelona, you can buy Messi, you can buy Ronaldo, you can buy Giancarlo Stanton, you can buy championships, but Pittsburgh only has one baseball team. So let's take the Yankees off and count the Mets. They only have two. The Pirates have five. And then between the Knicks and the Nets, they only have two championships between them, which is just unfathomably bad. So I really think that Pittsburgh is synonymous with winning. We're the city of champions. The culture and the history is rich. We started off with the Pirates winning, then we went to the Steelers, now we're in the Penguins. And just going to be a revolving door of these three teams just keep winning championships. Heck, in my lifetime, I've seen 5 championships and 7 appearances. I really think the history now, the generation before me, my father's history saw championships, and my grandfather's history saw championships. The history is going to keep going. It's bright. The history is rich. We have 17 championships total. So I really 16 championships with 3 teams. I think the history speaks for itself. The record speaks for itself.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Scrap for Your City, a lot of things come into play as we talk about the certain questions. But the bottom line is championships, is titles. Which teams have won championships, have come in clutch in situations like that. And I think that plays in a huge deal. And Jake made his arguments very well, very articulately, gave out stats, gave out things to back it up throughout the whole thing, and so did Elliot. But I think Jake really impressed me with his statistics throughout this whole thing. And really when it comes down to it, it comes down to championships. And Pittsburgh, with a much smaller city, much smaller market, fewer teams by more than double, have won a lot of championships given that situation. Pittsburgh wins, Jake wins, Scrap for Your City, that's it. Jake wins the title. Congrats to Pittsburgh. Elliot, I love the effort. Really didn't do anything wrong. It was the best you could have done, but I think Pittsburgh deserved to win this one, at least for now. Scrap for Your City Part 2. Maybe there'll be a Part 3 in the future. I won't be here for that, but maybe it could happen. All right, so that's our show for now. Pittsburgh wins. I'm your host, Chris Hayes. Jake Taylor, Elliot Hicks, thank you guys so much. From director Darnell Turner, producers Jared Brown, Izzy Muhammad. This is The Big Hit. Congrats to Pittsburgh. See you next week.